Good morning. My name is Jim Bunker. I'm an accredited claims agent. This is my address. Gulf War claims under 3.317 are undiagnosed illnesses passed by Congress in 1994, medically unexplained chronic multi-symptom illnesses, which is Section 2B, passed by Congress in 1991 that took effect in 2002, and then infectious diseases, which affect both Gulf War veterans and veterans in Afghanistan, which was added by the Secretary in 2011. You cannot file a claim for Gulf War illness. It's only a term used to cover all illnesses affected by Gulf War veterans. VBA will send you a letter asking what body parts or symptoms you are claiming. This is found within the M21 manual. VA no longer uses the M21 MR. If you see anybody referencing that, they're not an accredited person or they're using very outdated manuals. You need to respond to this letter or your claim will be denied. Please see our guide on page 16. These are references I use. The court will always go back to the federal law, which is the USC 38, sections 1117 and 1118. Covers Gulf War claims, and the CFR 3.317. The Federal Register listed here is when the original claim was put into act, and then the one in 2003 is when the CFR was changed to add the chronic multi-symptom illnesses. Within that you will see that it is not tied to any exposures in the Gulf. Court case in 2004 is where one of the major ones, and it will show that you do not need a nexus to your service on these conditions. It also explains about presumptives. 2006 is where you do not need medical evidence showing the illnesses, because they were trying to say that a veteran didn't reach 10% because he didn't have medical evidence in an x-ray showing joint problems. They were using the criteria for arthritis, and then they said they should be using fibromyalgia, which showed that. Joyner says that you don't have to have multiple tests forever. A limited number of testing show that a non-diagnosed illness is okay. 2005 research is on GERDs. VA longitudinal studies are the next two, showing higher rates than the M21 Life manual is what I use. You can never use that in an appeals case. It's just for references that we use as claims agents. Gulf War claims, what caused it? You don't have to worry about that because you cannot ascribe a cause. Your illness is presumed. Presumption of illnesses means that there is no known cause. If you have it, all you have to do is prove that you have it, and then that it reaches 10%. Only a doctor can give you clear medical reasoning. You cannot say that my illness is caused by an anthrax shot, or my illness is caused by DU, or my illness is caused by any exposures in the Gulf. Only doctors can prescribe causes. The VA can rebut any nexus that a doctor gives to your illness. Always remember that the VA has the right to do that, because the VA technically has all your medical information from your service. These are all the toxins are some of the toxins that was exposed to you while you served. You may or may not have been exposed to all these toxins, or a combination of these toxins. In 2010, the IOM Volume 10 stated that there were too many multiple toxins for anyone to be able to decipher out which one or multiples of these toxins caused the Gulf War illness within the veterans, and that is why it's going to be impossible to determine what caused the illnesses that the veteran suffers from. And that was in Volume 10. These are some of the illnesses in the last longitudinal study done by the VA on the 30,000 veteran studies. You'll note that asthma and migraine, seizures are at much higher rates for the deployed versus non-deployed. You'll also note that you have coronary artery disease, hypertension, but they listed PTSD, there's research that shows coronary artery disease, hypertension is caused by PTSD or is associated with PTSD at much higher rates, any mental disorders, and then have these illnesses. It's a VA's large studies you can find on their blog sites. But you always have to have a doctor nexus. You cannot just say, my headache is caused by my deployment. Because of these studies, you do need to have a doctor nexus between the two. And the fact that it's mere without, there's no way they can put it to any exposures in the Gulf without mere speculations. And you also have to turn in the study with a write-up that these studies shows this at a higher rate. The same thing as if you try to get anything related to PTSD, you have to say the medication as well, the treatment for the PTSD as well as PTSD. Undiagnosed illness is a term given to our symptomologies by Congress. Idiopathic illnesses, illnesses of unknown etiology is what it really is. An example would be idiopathic neuropathy is an undiagnosed illness. Dermatology of unknown etiology would be an example of skin problems. Those both fit within the law as passed in 1994. These are other things. These all come out of the CFR. The requirement is that it has to either start during the Gulf War, and if you put down that my illness started in Desert Storm, you'll have to then, that's called direct service connection, you have to show records in your service records. But being that it's presumptive, then it only needs to be 10% or more during the time period, which ends in 2021. So all you have to do then is just show that you meet the criteria underneath the law. The exclusionary time parts is if there's affirmative evidence the disability did not incur during active military service and Southwest Fleet operation. That is, if your records show, or if you tell the examiner, I had these symptoms prior to going to Desert Storm or Desert Shield, that's an exclusionary factor because the symptoms or the illness started before you ever deployed, which takes you out of the presumptive period, or if it's in your records. The other two parts here comes out of the USC 1113, which is the right for the VA to rebut any of the presumptive illnesses. Willful misconduct could be alcohol abuse, and which IBS can be tied to that. A lot of the symptoms for the undiagnosed illnesses are shared with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and IBS. The undiagnosed illness law was passed before fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue became parts within the CFR. IBS was always there. It was used to be called something else as the names changed. Raters aren't keen to medical diagnoses, and that's where we have the problems. But if you look at the first column and come across in our guide, you will notice how the symptoms are all shared. The main ones that aren't is skin disorders and menstrual disorders, but most of the others are all shared within these. The key is in fibromyalgia is that some of these have to be rated as secondaries, and you need a doctor's nexus on that, which is also covered within the guide. The other part is that some of the undiagnosed symptomologies can be attributed to illnesses that you may already have. Chest pains is you find within GERD, which is not a presumptive to the Gulf War. Heart attacks, COPDs, and neurological problems. If you have any of those, you cannot claim chest pains, and you cannot claim any of these other illnesses in the right-hand column. Fatigue can be because of PTSD, because it gives you a higher rating in PTSD or any other mental disorders. It can be because of medications you take, sleep apnea, anemia, thyroid disorders. If you have any of the ones on the one column, you cannot claim the other column. Memory, cognitive problems, TBIs, medications, mental disorders, sleep disturbances, PTSD because of the fact that you have the flashbacks, nightmares, sleep apnea, insomnia, restless leg syndromes. They also blame it on shift work, unfortunately. Joint pains, again, you'll see arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, and sometimes cancer. We see people file for joint pains. They go in for file for the joint pains. They file for some of these without ever seeing a doctor. They go in for a CMP exam, find out they got cancer or they have rheumatoid arthritis, which, because it's a diagnosed illness now, and the first time you come to see a doctor and they get denied. Skin disorder is the one that people have a hard time with because they go to the doctor and the doctor doesn't take good notes. They don't put down how much of the body is covered by the skin, or that the skin disorder might only cover a little bit of their hand or something, less than 5% of their exposed body, or less than 5% of their body. It's just a little patch on their skin. Remember, you have to get 10% of the body, or 10% rating. If it's less than 5% of your body, that's not even a 10% rating. And then the other part is the doctor doesn't document, doesn't get pictures into the medical files, doesn't say that it's covering X% of the exposed body or something, and it becomes hard. Also, if the skin disorder is diagnosed as being from a fungal or bacterial or insect bite or plant, then it becomes a diagnosed portion of the thing. Problem that sometimes you run into is you walk into a dermatologist, they look at you and say, oh, that's because of scabies or something, and not do any tests, and it excludes it. If they don't do the test, you fight the claim because they didn't do a clinical diagnosis, which means in a skin disorder they got to run the test.